July 2016, Glacier National Park, Montana. Twin sisters, Ava and Lily Reynolds, just 22 years old, set out on a daytime hike along a familiar trail, the one locals called the Tear of the Bear. The last signal from their tracking device was recorded at 9:45 p.m. on July 23rd. The message they sent home was only a few words. "We found the campsite. It looks like an ancient temple." Those were the final lines, before all contact was cut off, before the two of them vanished, leaving no trace behind. A massive search, launched immediately, stretched for days, then weeks, yet brought nothing but emptiness. Their belongings were found, their camp left behind, and a strange trail of footprints leading deeper into the forest, as if someone, or something, had quietly drawn them into the darkness, never to return. 7 years later. August 2023. A group of students, conducting a geological survey, stumbled upon a decaying wooden hut hidden away in the frozen mountains. Inside, in a space less than 5 feet wide, were the skeletons of the two sisters, bound tightly together, back to back, with an old rope rotted by time. And the question that chilled everyone was not how they died, but why and who left them to depart this world in such a terrifying position. Ava and Lily Reynolds, twin sisters born in the autumn of 1994, grew up in a quiet little town on the outskirts of Missoula, Montana. With soft blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and gentle smiles, they were often called the Sunshine Girls by those who knew them. Yet what people remembered most was not just their appearance, but the bond between them so close, so inseparable, that it seemed impossible to imagine one without the other. Ava, the older by only a few minutes, was the more outgoing and adventurous of the two. She loved challenges, she loved the thrill of planning new trips, and she was often the one who convinced Lily to step out of her comfort zone. Lily, the younger sister, was gentle, reflective, and deeply sensitive. She loved books, music, and quiet evenings, often providing the steady calm that balanced Ava's restless energy. One thrived in the spotlight, the other found peace in the background, yet together they created a harmony that everyone admired. The Reynolds family was modest and close-knit. Their parents always spoke proudly of their daughters, not only for their solid grades in school, but also for the kindness and sincerity they carried into every relationship. Friends recalled, "When you saw Ava and Lily walking together, you understood what it meant to be connected by the heart." By the time they turned 22, the sisters were still living together, attending the same local college, and sharing dreams of seeing the world side by side. They often said their journey would begin at home, in the mountains and forests of Montana, a land they both loved deeply. The lakes, the trails, the endless ridges of pine trees, these were not foreign places to them, but a backdrop to their childhood. The hike they planned in July 2016 was meant to be nothing more than a small adventure, a weekend escape into the wilderness they thought they knew so well. The day before they vanished, Ava called her mother. Her voice was light, full of excitement. "Don't worry, Mom. Lily and I are only going out for a few hours. We'll be back before dark." That cheerful promise, later, would become the last sound Mrs. Reynolds ever heard from her daughters. Friends remembered how deeply loyal the sisters were to one another. If one of them was hurt, the other would be there to take care of her. If one of them got lost, the other would never, ever leave. That bond became one of the most haunting parts of their story. When the two were finally discovered, their skeletons bound tightly back to back, it struck the community not only as a disturbing detail, but as a chilling symbol. Perhaps, even in their final moments, Ava and Lily had faced their fate together. Ava and Lily were not just names in a missing persons case. They were daughters, sisters, friends, two young women full of dreams, laughter, and love. And it is precisely because of who they once were that their disappearance and the way they were found continues to haunt everyone who hears their story. On the morning of July 23, 2016, The Reynolds sisters left their small apartment in Missoula with light backpacks, a folded trail map, and the kind of carefree excitement that often comes before a summer adventure. They told their parents they were heading into Glacier National Park for the day, planning to hike the Water Bear Trail, a path they had read about but never fully explored. To them, it was not just another trail. It was a chance to step away from schoolwork, routines, and the noise of town to reconnect with the wilderness that had always felt like home. Ava, true to her adventurous spirit, had mapped out the route days earlier. She reassured her mother that the hike was considered safe, well marked, and that they would return before sunset. Lily, more reserved, carried a journal and a small camera in her pack, wanting to capture the quiet beauty of the forest rather than simply race through it. Together, they represented two halves of the same soul, one eager for challenge, the other drawn to stillness. By noon, the sisters were spotted by another group of hikers near the trailhead. Witnesses remembered them as cheerful, laughing, and in good spirits. Nothing about their demeanor suggested trouble or hesitation. They were young, healthy, experienced enough in the outdoors to know basic safety measures. The forest that day was alive with birdsong, the sun spilling in through tall pines, and the air carried the sharp, sweet scent of mountain summer. As afternoon deepened, Ava and Lily moved further from the crowded paths. The trail narrowed, twisting into denser woods, where cell service began to fade. They paused occasionally to drink water, to snap photos, to admire a hidden stream rushing over smooth rocks. These moments, captured only in Lily's camera, would later become fragments of their final day. The last digital trace came at 9:45 p.m. Ava's phone pinged briefly before cutting off. The text to their family was short, almost cryptic. "We found the campsite. It looks like an ancient temple." The words unsettled those who later read them. What did they mean by temple? Some believed they stumbled upon an old ranger station or abandoned shelter, but the description was strange, almost eerie. What happened after that text remains a void. Search teams later reconstructed a partial timeline from scattered clues. Their vehicle was found parked neatly at the trailhead, undisturbed. The sisters' backpacks, torn and scattered, were located miles from the path, near a clearing that search dogs marked with unusual hesitation. Footprints, some theirs, some inconclusive, led deeper into the forest, until they vanished altogether. For the family, the first hours of silence were filled with hope. Perhaps the sisters had simply lost their way, delayed by nightfall. But as the second day passed, and then the third, hope thinned like mist. Rangers combed through ridges. Helicopters scanned the valleys. Volunteers spread out in lines across the forest floor. Yet nothing explained why two young women so familiar with the outdoors would wander so far from the safety of the trail. Theories multiplied even in those early days. Some said they must have encountered wildlife, a bear, perhaps that startled them off the path. Others whispered of strangers in the woods, of hunters or drifters living unseen in the national park. But without evidence, everything remained speculation. For Ava and Lily, the journey had begun as a simple day in the mountains. It was meant to be just another hike, another shared memory in a lifetime of companionship. Instead, it became their last trail, a path that ended not in the sunlight of return, but in the shadow of an enduring mystery. When Ava and Lily did not return that evening, their parents at first tried to quiet the unease in their hearts. Perhaps the hike had taken longer than expected. Perhaps they had camped overnight. The mountains, after all, were unpredictable, and delays were not uncommon. But as midnight passed and there was still no word, worry turned to dread. By dawn, the Reynolds family had called the park rangers, and the search began. On July 24th, the first teams were dispatched to the Water Bear Trail. Rangers found the sisters' car still parked neatly at the trailhead, locked, untouched, as if waiting for them to return. That detail chilled the family. It meant the sisters had gone into the forest with every intention of coming back. Something had stopped them. Volunteers from nearby towns soon joined the search. Dozens of people, family, friends, strangers, fanned out through the dense pine woods. Dogs were brought in, trained to pick up human scent. For a time, it seemed as if hope was still possible. The sisters were young, healthy, and experienced enough to survive a night outdoors. Perhaps they were injured, but waiting to be found. Perhaps they had taken shelter in one of the old ranger cabins scattered across the park. For the first 48 hours, optimism drove the search forward. Helicopters circled overhead, their blades cutting through the silence of the forest, scanning for movement, for fire, for any sign of life. Rangers followed the riverbanks, calling out the sisters' names, their voices echoing through canyons. At night, lights flickered in the darkness as teams continued their work, unwilling to let the cover of night erase precious hours. But the forest kept its silence. By the third day, signs of unease grew. Dogs picked up faint trails that seemed to vanish abruptly, as if cut off in mid-stride. A few personal items, a torn strap, a water bottle were discovered near a clearing. But they told no story. They only deepened the mystery. How had those belongings ended up so far from the marked trail? And why were they scattered, rather than left in a single place? For the Reynolds family, every hour felt like a lifetime. Their parents, standing at the ranger station, clung to updates, desperate for news. Friends arrived with food, comfort, and prayers, but nothing could fill the unbearable void of not knowing. The sisters' photographs were circulated, their smiling faces appearing on posters, on local news broadcasts, on the walls of gas stations and grocery stores. As the days turned into a week, the search grew larger. State authorities joined in. Specialized teams combed steep ridges, dangerous ravines, and caves hidden beneath the rocks. Every possibility was considered: an accident, a fall, disorientation, or something far darker. Yet despite the massive effort, the results were the same: silence, emptiness, absence. Some volunteers recalled the haunting stillness of the woods during those days. It was as if the forest was swallowing sound, one searcher later said. You could shout their names, but all you got back was the echo. It was like the trees themselves were keeping a secret. By the end of the second week, exhaustion set in. Resources began to thin, and officials slowly scaled back the operation. For the Reynolds family, that decision felt like a second loss. The possibility of finding the sisters alive had slipped further and further away. Still, the search never fully ended. Rangers continued patrols, hikers were urged to report anything unusual, and the family refused to let the case fade into the shadows. Every trail, every abandoned campsite, every unmarked path carried the hope that somehow, somewhere, Ava and Lily might still be found. But the mountains gave nothing back. The forest stood silent, and the sisters' fate remained hidden, leaving behind only questions, whispers, and the aching weight of absence. Time has a strange way of dulling memories, but it never fully erases them. For the Reynolds family in Missoula, the disappearance of Ava and Lily remained an unhealed wound. Each passing year only deepened the ache, a reminder of summer days that should have been filled with laughter and long drives through the Montana countryside. Instead, July became a month of silence, candles lit on anniversaries, and questions that no one could answer. For the investigators, the case had long gone cold. The Glacier National Park disappearance was one of dozens in the region that haunted rangers and law enforcement. Despite years of volunteer searches, tip lines, and interviews, no evidence surfaced, no clothing, no tracks, no bones. The twins had simply vanished. Some locals whispered they had run away. Others claimed the wilderness had swallowed them whole. But the truth, if it existed, lay hidden in the mountains, waiting for time to give it back. Then came August 2023. James Carter, a seasoned park ranger who had worked Glacier for over 20 years, set out on his routine patrol near one of the older, lesser-known areas of the park. The trails there had long since fallen out of use, reclaimed by dense underbrush and the slow rot of time. That morning, Carter followed the faint outline of a path that twisted deeper into the trees, guided only by his familiarity with the land. It was there, tucked between pine and spruce, that he noticed the shape: a cabin, half collapsed, its roof sagging under the weight of years, its wood gray with rot. It looked like something from another century, a relic abandoned long before the park became what it was. Carter approached cautiously, pushing aside ivy and ferns that had nearly devoured the structure. The door hung crooked on rusted hinges, and with a firm push, he stepped inside. At first, it seemed like any forgotten shelter: dust, scattered wood, the faint smell of damp earth. But then his flashlight caught something in the corner. 2 figures. Or rather, what remained of them. Skeletal remains, positioned back to back, as if they had leaned on each other in their final moments. The silence in the room pressed heavy against Carter's chest as he slowly moved closer. He saw tatters of fabric clinging to bone, long decayed but still carrying traces of color. One shirt, faintly patterned in a way that matched an old missing person's description. Nearby lay a torn backpack, collapsed and weathered by years of neglect. Inside he found what would erase all doubt: a faded driver's license belonging to Ava Reynolds. The weight of 7 years crashed down in that moment. Carter radioed the discovery, his voice unsteady. By the time forensic teams arrived, the cabin was swarmed with investigators who tread carefully, knowing they were stepping into the heart of a mystery that had tormented a family and a community for far too long. The identification was swift. Dental records confirmed the skeletons were Ava and Lily Reynolds. The twins had been there all along, hidden in plain sight, just miles from where they were last seen. The news rippled through Missoula and beyond. For the Reynolds family, it was both closure and devastation. They had answers at last, but the truth was far from comforting. The questions multiplied. How did the girls end up in the cabin? Did they get lost and stumble upon it by chance? Or had someone led them there? And most haunting of all, what had caused their deaths? The discovery did not end the mystery. If anything, it deepened it. Because sometimes, finding the missing is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of an even darker one. When the remains of Ava and Lily Reynolds were finally identified, the world expected clarity. But instead of answers, the discovery only birthed more unsettling questions. How could 2 young women, experienced enough to handle day hikes in the Montana wilderness, end up in a cabin so close to familiar trails? Why had they remained hidden for 7 long years, as if the forest itself conspired to conceal them? Investigators, journalists, and even amateur sleuths began to put forth their theories. One of the earliest explanations was the simplest: an accident. Some believed the twins had wandered off the trail, disoriented by fatigue or weather, and stumbled upon the abandoned cabin for shelter. Once inside, they may have succumbed to hypothermia or dehydration, but this theory felt incomplete. Why had they been sitting back to back, almost as if they knew the end was coming? And why had search teams, who scoured the area extensively, never discovered the structure before? Others pointed to foul play. Rumors swirled that someone may have lured the girls into the woods. The cabin, isolated and forgotten, could have served as the perfect hiding place for a crime. But no signs of struggle were ever reported. No restraints. No obvious evidence of violence. If someone had harmed Ava and Lily, the traces had been erased by time, or had never been left at all. A darker theory soon gained traction: the possibility of pursuit. Some speculated the sisters had been followed that day. Witnesses recalled seeing them on the trail, but no one could account for their movements afterward. Could they have been chased, fleeing deeper into the park, only to collapse in exhaustion inside the cabin? The thought of them running for their lives, leaning on each other in their final moments, was almost too much for their family to bear. Then came the whispers, fueled by Glacier's long history of eerie disappearances. Some locals spoke of the land itself, of strange energies, hidden caves, and places where compasses failed. There were tales of travelers who vanished without a trace, only to be found years later in places already searched. These stories, though unprovable, carried a chilling resonance with the Reynolds case. The most unsettling theory of all was that the cabin had been overlooked on purpose. Some questioned whether it had ever been part of the official search grid. If so, How could dozens of rangers and volunteers have missed it? And if it wasn't, why? Was it negligence? Or was there something about that place that made people turn away, even unknowingly? In the end, every explanation felt like a shadow, suggestive but never solid. The truth remained just out of reach, like something glimpsed in the corner of your eye that disappears when you look directly at it. For the Reynolds family, the theories did little to ease the pain. Each possibility painted a different picture of Ava and Lily's final moments, none of them comforting. The cabin had given back the twins' bodies, but not their story. And until that story was known, the mystery of Glacier National Park would continue to linger like a ghost over the mountains. The case of Ava and Lily Reynolds closes not with answers, but with silence. Their remains, bound together in that forgotten wooden cabin, are now at rest, yet the echoes of their final hours still stir in the hearts of all who followed their story. For their family, the grief has transformed into something deeper, a strange coexistence of sorrow and fragile peace. They no longer wait by the phone for a call that will never come, yet every night, when the wind brushes against the windows of their Missoula home, it feels as though the twins are still whispering, still present in some unseen way. The discovery in 2023 ended a 7-year torment of uncertainty, but it also carved new scars. For the parents, the haunting image of their daughters tied back to back is one they can never unsee. For the community, it is a reminder of how quickly light can vanish into darkness, how two vibrant young women can disappear as though swallowed by the very land they love to explore. And for those who walk Glacier National Park today, there is an unspoken weight in the air. Hikers pass along the trails where Ava and Lily once laughed, the trees towering like watchful sentinels. Some leave small offerings, flowers, folded notes, even stones engraved with initials near the ranger stations, quiet acts of remembrance for two sisters whose story has become inseparable from the park itself. But perhaps what lingers most is not fear, but reflection. Ava and Lily's fate reminds us how fragile every step of life can be, how easily plans for tomorrow can be stolen by the shadows of today. It is a lesson written in silence, carved into the mountains, left behind for those willing to listen. To you, watching this story unfold, hold close the people you love while you still can. Send that message. Make that call. Take that walk together, because we never know when the chance will be gone. The Reynolds sisters did not choose their ending, but in their bond, they left us something enduring. Even in their final moment, they were together, back to back, as if refusing to let go. That image, though haunting, is also a testament to love, to loyalty, to a connection so deep that even death could not break it. And perhaps, in the end, that is what remains. Not the mystery, not the unanswered questions, but the unshakable truth that in life and in death, Ava and Lily Reynolds were never alone. If this story moved you, and you want to hear more haunting mysteries of those who were last seen, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Each week, we uncover the stories that the world tried to forget, and the voices that still echo in the silence.